Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and today I'm going to answer a question I've had for a very long time about tanky builds in Dragon Age Origins. Which is better, health or defense? If you've been playing DAO for a while and been involved in the online community, you likely know that people have debated this for years. And at least as far as I understood it from reading the wiki and various forums, the general consensus is that putting points into dexterity for defense is better than putting points into constitution for health. But I'm not convinced. See, I've been on somewhat of a Diablo 2 kick these past weeks, messing around in Act 1 with different characters since that's my favorite thing to do. But I digress. The reason I mentioned Diablo 2 is that most of the builds in that game have a common theme. Put only enough points into strength and dexterity to be able to equip the gear you want, and pretty much everything else goes into vitality to increase your HP. The reasoning is that even if you have high defense and or block chance, you will still get hit. There's no way to avoid all hits, so it's far more important to have the health pool to be able to survive whatever damage you inevitably take. Now, of course, in Diablo, improving your damage mostly comes from your gear, plus the skills you use, so in a not-so-gear-focused game like Dragon Age Origins, this may not apply quite the same. However, this curiosity has just grown over the years until I couldn't ignore it anymore, so I'm finally testing it out for myself to see how I feel about the health versus defense debate once and for all. Before we get into it, I'll take a moment to say a special thank you to my members. I appreciate all of you so much, and your support allows me to keep going. Joining as a member would help the channel a lot, but of course only do so if you want to and if you can afford it. I'm always grateful, even if you just like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment. Back to the experiment. Here is my hypothesis. What if health is more effective than defense for survivability? I'm testing the effectiveness of health specifically for tanky characters, aka two-handed and weapon and shield warriors, because in DAO you can only improve your offensive character's damage so far with gear and abilities, and the rest has to come from attributes. I also want to test out a dual-wielding rogue by adding some points into Constitution, because while they are focused on damage, they are vulnerable in the front line to enemy attacks and abilities, and no matter their defense score, some things will get through, especially spells and abilities that automatically hit. But while for warriors or arcane warriors, you could keep putting points into Constitution for the entire game, and even switch entirely to it after having enough strength and dexterity for gear and talents, for a dual wielder, I imagine that after putting 10 to 15 points into Constitution, you could stop. They just need a little extra survivability since they're not meant to tank too many enemy hits. Ranged damagers like archers and regular mages need to focus on improving their damage and don't need defensive stats since they're mostly staying safe in the back while the front line keeps enemies occupied. A blood mage will of course want high HP to cast more spells with, but they also want high magic, so it's fine if most of their health bonuses come from gear, and they only spend 1 point on Constitution per level up. I'm going to test a two-handed warrior, a weapon and shield tank, a dual-wielding rogue, and a blood mage. I initially wanted to test out an arcane warrior mage, but that would have required playing the game for far too long considering the time frame of 2 days I gave myself for this experiment. And besides that, it would have been very awkward to have 4 melee characters in the party. Far better to at least have 1 ranged party member. Here's my plan for the 4 characters. My warden is going to be a dwarven two-handed warrior, putting their level 1 attribute points all into strength to be able to unlock Indomitable. From level 2 onward, I'll put 2 points into strength and 1 point into constitution during every level up until I reach 42 strength. I may occasionally put 2 points into willpower and 1 point into constitution if I feel like my stamina is too low. After reaching 42 strength, I will mainly just put points into constitution, and maybe a few in willpower as needed, depending on how much stamina I get from gear. Alistair will be my weapon and shield guinea pig. I will respecialize him with a mod to ensure he has his attribute points spent like a player character without the weird auto-leveling done by the game. While normally I'd say that weapon and shield tanks need 26 dexterity to unlock the shield mastery passive, I don't actually think it's needed for a tank who isn't focused on having very high defense. So Alistair only needs a base of 20 dexterity at around level 9 to unlock the shield tactics passive, which gives him flanking immunity. Other than that, he needs 42 strength to equip tier 7 massive armors, or 38 strength to equip tier 6 massive armors or tier 7 heavy ones. Everything else can go into Constitution, and likely no points or very few are needed in Willpower because weapon and shield characters don't have many active abilities to use. Liliana will be respecialized into a dual-wielding rogue, and her level-ups will consist of either 2 Dexterity and 1 Constitution, or 2 Cunning and 1 Constitution. Mostly focus on the first version until she reaches 26 Dexterity to wield decently high-tier daggers, then switch to the Cunning plus Constitution level up. Tier 7 daggers require 30 Dexterity, but she doesn't actually need her base dex to reach that high because plus 4 dex is super easy to get from gear. So unless I want to unlock high-tier dual-wielding talents like Whirlwind, her base dexterity stays at 26. Since she's a damager, I will stop putting points into Constitution once it reaches somewhere between 20 and 25, since I think that should be enough to improve her survivability, but we'll see. Morrigan will be a blood mage, respecialized just like Alistair to remove her useless shapeshifter specialization and ensure she's not weirdly auto-leveled. She will get close to enemies sometimes to cast short-range spells like Flame Blast, Cone of Cold, and Mind Blast, so the extra health will both be used as a spellcasting resource with blood magic and for survivability. Unlike for warriors and rogues, there isn't a specific magic score that Morrigan will stop at, since most spells scale with spell power pretty much indefinitely, so Morrigan will put 2 points into magic and 1 point into Constitution on every level up. Now that you know my plan, here's how it went into practice. I picked a Dwarf Noble Warrior from my saves with whom I just completed Ostagar. There wasn't any point in going through the prologue since at a low level you can't notice much of a difference between a handful of points in one attribute versus another. I checked I was on hard, a good difficulty to test this on, since I didn't want it to be too easy, but also didn't want to have to struggle with Nightmare. I respecialized my Warden to make sure I spent the points according to the plan. Once outside Flemeth's hut, I also respecialized Alistair and Morrigan and spent their attributes. I unlocked the Champion specialization on Alistair since I figured the Rally Sustained would be useful later on to increase the attack score of all 3 melee characters. I picked Blood Mage for Morrigan since she could start using Blood Magic for health-based spellcasting right away, especially because I have the Sash of Forbidden Secrets DLC belt, which grants the improved Blood Magic effect, aka spells cost 25% less health. The fight against the Darkspawn when recruiting the dog was super easy and finished super fast. In fact, every single combat in Lothering and later on in Denrim ended much faster than I expected, since all my characters were dealing a lot of damage. To be fair, I focused on strength for both my warrior and Alistair. Liliana got dexterity and was immediately able to equip the Edge Dagger. Morrigan got the best spells like Flame Blast for AoE fire damage, Flaming Weapons to give everyone extra fire damage, Winter's Grasp to freeze enemies, and Stone Fist to shatter the frozen enemy or knock someone else down, plus Mind Blast to stun all enemies nearby, Heal to keep others alive, Drain Life for the nice spirit damage, and a little bit of self-heal. I think my party felt so powerful because I allowed myself to use DLC items as soon as they could be equipped, and also purchased a bunch of great items from Denrim, like the Reaper's Vestment robes and Torch of Ember staff for Morrigan, and some runes. As a Dwarf Noble, you get more money if you sell your stuff to Gorham in Denrim, so that's why I traveled there immediately after Lothering. Plus, there's easy XP and money from Denrim side quests, and I also wanted to unlock Haven on the map by killing the fake Wayland in Brother Genitivi's home. It was just super easy to kill everything. I was mowing all the enemies down with no issue. It didn't feel at all like I was playing on hard, and I barely had to use any lesser health poultices during more than an hour of gameplay, during which I leveled everyone up and got a bunch of good gear. I will say that usually on hard difficulty, even if I am using DLC items, my characters tend to get to low HP far more often and require more uses of heal or health poultices. So already, even just a bit over an hour into the experiment, I could see how the extra max health helped my characters fight more comfortably. I don't think that the plus 10 or so defense I could have gotten at this point by investing into dexterity instead of a constitution or equipping defense-oriented gear would have made as much of a difference in survivability as the health did. This is because in the grand scheme of things, plus or minus 10 defense just isn't significant enough to noticeably affect how often enemies miss their attacks on you, and certainly it won't help at all against spells or automatic hits. Before tackling the 2 main quests I wanted to try, Arl of Redcliffe and Urn of Sacred Ashes, I still needed some more gear, especially for my warden who was missing good weapons and armor. For a decent chest piece, I took a quick trip to the Dalish camp and Bristolian forest to complete the rare Ironbark quest. Didn't have to fight much in the forest since the Ironbark is close, saved Dain so I could get his equipment, his boots went to Liliana for the constitution, then I came back to the Dalish camp to get Varathorn's armor. It's a tier 6 medium chest piece with bonus armor and stamina, which is perfect for the early game. For my first weapon, I traveled to the Frostback Mountains to enter Orzammar so I could get Ageless, a powerful greatsword against Darkspawn. There's this group of bounty hunters in the mountain pass that's meant to be a gate for the player to ensure you're powerful enough since Orzammar and the Deep Rose are high-level areas. I managed to beat them just fine, though Alistair fell unconscious because I wasn't paying attention to his HP. Still, considering the fact I was just level 8 here, it was a breeze. I went and fought the Secret Dragon in the Royal Palace for the Ageless Greatsword, also an easy fight, and went by the Shaper to get the Gloves of Diligence from a locked chest. They're tier 6 gloves with a huge +4 to armor, so they're the highest armor gloves, perfect for either of my 2 warriors. After I geared up my Warden a little, I felt ready to go through the Return to Ostagar DLC for 2 other good weapons and an armor set. I was still only level 8, and the Darkspawn in this area are pretty tough, but I really wanted the gear from RTO and figured it would be a fun challenge to complete early. The whole DLC was, in fact, yet again, a breeze. I was surprised to find another positive aspect of having high max health on your characters: surviving Curse of Mortality. I first saw Alistair was able to live through it when it was cast on him during combat. He got really low, but the spell faded just at the right time so I could heal him. Just a bit later, Morrigan also got cursed towards the end of a fight and managed to survive. Once combat ended, the exploration health regen kicked in and it was no issue. She wouldn't have been able to survive the spell if combat had lasted longer, I don't think. But to be fair, she was already damaged by her blood magic when the curse was cast on her, so maybe if she was at or close to 100% HP, she would have survived it. Anyway, in a usual game where I don't put points into Constitution and don't prioritize health and Constitution on gear, neither Alistair nor Morrigan would have survived. I usually unlock the Force Field spell early, specifically to protect party members from Curse of Mortality, Grab, or Overwhelm, because otherwise they're very likely to fall unconscious if they're affected by any of these. So it was really nice to see that with high health, you don't need to fear these abilities as much. One of the most dangerous enemy spells had just been turned into mostly an annoyance. Definitely a point towards health and armor over defense in my book. The main weapon I wanted from here was Nug Crusher, a maul with a chance to stun as well as a big bonus to stamina, which would be a great general purpose weapon for my Warden. Ageless was my Darkspawn killing one. I also picked up Merrick's Blade and Kaelin's Shield, which I decided I might use on Alistair as a second weapon set if I got around to fighting more Darkspawn. Otherwise, in non-Darkspawn fights, he was completely fine with the Reaper's Cudgel and Bulwark of the True King combo. Kaelin's armor set went on my Warden, and I gave any good armor pieces I didn't want to Alistair, like the Gloves of Diligence. Due to the extra strength from the Reaper's Cudgel, Alistair already had the Blood Dragon plate armor equipped, which gave him extra health, so Varathorn's armor stayed in my inventory, already made obsolete. Sorry, Varathorn. After conquering Ostagar, I set my sights on the first main quest, the Arl of Redcliffe. Here, I'd get to fight undead and level up a bit, and after that, in Urn of Sacred Ashes, there would be more enemy variety, regular cultists, mages, some wraiths, and drakes and dragons. Before traveling to Redcliffe, I made sure I sold everything I didn't need to Gorham, and enchanted my weapons with runes at camp to improve my damage. In Redcliffe, I didn't bother preparing the village for the undead attack much. I intimidated Dwyn into joining the militia, and convinced Owen to do the repairs by promising to save his daughter from the castle. The undead attack went very well, though at some point I guess one of the NPCs must have died without me noticing, because I wasn't given the Helm of the Red the next morning. I could have sworn everyone lived, but in any case, it was a very easy set of encounters. The castle wasn't much different. I melted through groups of enemies much easier than I usually do, especially the big group in this hallway that didn't get to do much since Morrigan roasted them with a fireball and flame blast, the Revenant in the courtyard who made the mistake of pulling Morrigan and Liliana right next to him. Even the animated suits of armor ended up going down a lot easier than I thought, and these guys are actually a difficult encounter because of their high armor. Usually I have 1 or 2 party members fall unconscious when fighting them. Finally, I also fought the demon-possessed Connor. Don't know why I thought it would be a hard fight, but once again, it wasn't. Other than the fact that the game felt like I was playing it on easy instead of hard this entire time, I didn't notice anything else special about the benefits of extra max health. Maybe the fact that Morrigan had a much easier time casting spells with both mana and health, switching between them and only using a few potions even in longer fights. After saving the village and castle, I returned to Owen to get my reward for finding his daughter, a useless medium chest piece, and more importantly bought the Boots of Diligence, which also have an armor bonus similar to the gloves. I gave them to Alistair, since until then he hadn't had very good boots. Every other item I looted from Redcliffe was useless for me. While Eamon's shield is usually a great early game shield due to having extra defense and stamina, Alistair already had the Bulwark of the True King as his main shield, and optionally Kaelin's shield in a set with Merrick's Blade against Darkspawn, so he had absolutely no need for low-level shields. Before continuing on to Haven for the Urn of Sacred Ashes, I sold everything I didn't need to Gorham, bought a couple of weapon runes for a bit of extra damage. Since I had enough money, I also went to Orzammar to buy the Life Giver ring to give Morrigan more health and health regen to be able to cast more spells with blood magic active. The Sacred Ashes quest also went incredibly well. There's one harder fight in the Ruined Temple against a few mages and a large group of cultists, but it was actually not that bad, even if in the beginning Morrigan was frozen and couldn't do anything to help. But no one fell unconscious. Usually this encounter is very dangerous and sometimes makes me lose multiple party members or even get my party wiped in challenge runs. But this time, while it felt a bit more difficult than normal fights, it didn't feel all that threatening. In the caverns, the fight against the cultist overseer, cultist dragonlings, and drakes is the hardest one in the entire area. Yes, even harder than the Colgrim fight, but honestly my entire party was so safe and healthy that I had no issue killing everything. The Colgrim fight took a little longer because Colgrim himself is super tanky, but once the two mages were down, the dangerous part was over, and it was just a matter of time until Colgrim was dead too. And then my final challenge for this experiment, the High Dragon. This is why I picked the Urn of Sacred Ashes quest as my second and final testing grounds. I wanted to be still relatively low level when attempting to kill the High Dragon, since it's one of the hardest boss fights in the game, especially when done early. The High Dragon is a level 15 monster with 3,765 health, 96 damage per hit, 33 armor, and 75% fire resistance. It's also immune to knockdown, stun, charm, confusion, fear, and slip effects. In preparation, before calling the dragon, I made everyone use a warmth balm. Alistair used the greater one, everyone else got a lesser balm because that's what I had in my inventory. I used the Frost Weapons enchantment for the entirety of Sacred Ashes because the dragonlings and drakes are immune to fire, so flaming weapons wouldn't have done anything, and the cold damage is good against the regular cultists, not just the dragons. I mainly controlled Morrigan for this fight and for most of the experiment since mages are best when manually controlled, and I also just like playing as a mage. I kept using Winter's Breath, Cone of Cold when the dragon was close, Lightning, Stone Fist, and Drain Life to damage it, healed allies when they got low, and made sure that everyone used a health poultice when their HP was low and heal was on cooldown. Both Alistair and my warden got chomped on a few times, but lived through it. I did heal them with Morrigan too. And until the very end when I got lazy and refused to let Liliana drink another health poultice, no one went down. I saw she was low HP and didn't really care because the dragon was almost dead, so I let her go down. Overall, I was surprised and impressed that I could have kept everyone alive throughout the entire thing and fairly easily beat the High Dragon while my party was level 12, 3 whole levels below the High Dragon. Yes, I had good gear, but I didn't have everything. I was still missing a strong second dagger for Liliana, better accessories for most of them, like the Andrew's Blessing Belt, the Spellward Amulet, the Key to the City Ring, the Helm of Hanleith, and so on. I had deleted the High Regard of House Dace amulet on this character, so I didn't even have that to give to Liliana. I had forgotten to buy a Cold Staff for this area, so Morrigan's basic attacks from her Fire Staff were doing no damage to the Dragonlings and Drakes, and were barely tickling the High Dragon. So I could have had a bunch more gear that was better for this fight, plus have higher stats and more abilities if I was higher level, but I didn't need it. After I defeated the High Dragon, I saved and quit the game. With this entire questline, and especially the boss fight on the mountaintop, I saw everything I needed to see to reach a conclusion. The conclusion: yes, health and armor is in fact better than defense. Is this a universal truth? No, I don't necessarily think so. It probably has a lot to do with your preferred playstyle and party composition. If you have a lot of mages with utility and defensive spells like Force Field, Dispel Magic, Anti-Magic Shield, and other things that can protect your allies or else immobilize enemies, then your character's HP maybe won't matter that much. If you like to chug a ton of health potions, then you also probably don't need all that much max health since you can just use a ton of potions and spam healing spells. I've personally never been that kind of min-maxing player who thinks about how to counter everything with a perfect combination of abilities, or who plans out exactly in which order to do all the quests to make sure I have the highest chance to avoid enemy attacks based on the enemy's levels and my current defense score. I'm a much more casual and freeform player even when I play on hard or nightmare, and so the high defense approach is just not suited to me. I don't think focusing on defense is min-maxing necessarily, but you are getting a lot more stats from investing into dexterity, attack, defense, damage for bows and daggers, and physical resistance. You can also easily increase defense through a bunch of active, passive, and sustained abilities, far more than you can increase constitution or health. But I just think that the combination of health and armor is better because it allows you to take more damage before you fall to 0 HP, and armor obviously reduces the physical damage you take. For the few instances where elemental damage is an issue, you can use a balm or salve that increases your resistance to that element, like I did for the High Dragon fight. Or if you feel like you need even more than that, equip gear with extra resistances. But the extra max health itself is effective against all types of damage, and more importantly, it actually helps keep you alive when those super dangerous enemy abilities that automatically hit are used on your characters. It doesn't matter how much defense or even dodge chance you have when a dragon bites down on your character and waves them around in its mouth. The only thing that will save you then is health and armor and healing spells from an ally. The funny thing is that I actually used to do this in my first years of playing Dragon Age Origins as a teenager. I put 1 point into Constitution every time I leveled up on every single character regardless of class. I knew from previous RPGs I had played that more health equals more survivability. And I don't know why, but at some point I read through the Dragon Age wiki and through what people were recommending on forums, and I decided that because these recommendations were written on the internet, they must be expert opinions and thus must be true. Suddenly, it was 100% certain in my mind that defense was always better than health and armor. I thought this way because I'm autistic, and especially back then, I had a serious case of black and white thinking and didn't grasp the concept of nuance just yet. So I'm very glad that I finally thought to give this another try, even though my teenage self had made up his mind about this apparent fact. Over the years, I kept doubting that defense was better after I switched to the no points into Constitution mentality. I noticed that I struggled in certain fights I didn't used to struggle in back when everyone had higher HP, and it's kind of a miracle that I somehow wasn't struggling through those fights, because I made a lot of other dumb choices in my first playthroughs. Terrible choices, like having melee weapons equipped on everyone, including archers and mages. If someone attacked them in melee, they'd switch to the shittiest little daggers and swords and barely do any damage, and then I'd forget to switch them back to their regular bow or staff for a while and wonder why the next fight was taking so long. I bought basic weapons and armor without any bonuses just because they were a higher tier than what I currently had equipped. My gaming skills and understanding of the game were abysmal. But even with those handicaps, with higher HP, I still managed to complete the game, which just goes to show how higher health helps you survive, even with all the other stupid decisions you make. I don't think you need to be as strict about putting points into Constitution during every single level up like I did for this experiment, but do put some points into it because that extra HP could be the difference maker when a dragon bites down, or you get Curse of Mortality cast on you, or an ogre grabs you. That extra HP could save your character's lives and win you the fight, even if you're multiple levels below the enemy and don't have the best gear. In light of this, now I feel like I have to make new builds for tanks that take the findings of this experiment into consideration, because all my DAO builds until now mostly tell you to avoid putting points into Constitution if possible, because all it gives you is +5 health. Well, we just found out that +5 health is actually great. So do be on the lookout for the new health and armor focused tank builds I'll make for Origins, probably in between the Awakening builds I'm currently working on. Anyway, I hope you found this Dragon Age Origins experiment interesting, and I'm very curious to hear what your opinion and experience regarding defense versus health and armor is. If you enjoyed this, stick around for future guides and other videos I plan to make about Dragon Age and games I care about. Feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, or maybe become a channel member. Everything helps. This has been B-Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.